Where the road forgets your name, a story of what survives when everything else is gone. I woke up in a field in January not knowing who I was. I found out 6 months later that the person who left me there was the person who knew me best. This is a story of who I became anyway. Part 1, the field. The cold was the first thing. Not pain, not yet. Cold and the specific texture of snow against my cheek, and darkness that was not the darkness of a room, but the darkness of open sky with no light reaching it. I was face down in something deep and soft and freezing, and it took me several seconds to understand that I was outside, that I was lying in a field, that the temperature around me was approximately what my body would reach if I stayed much longer. I pushed myself up. The pain came with the movement, a concentrated high pressure point at the back left of my skull that made the world tilt sharply to the right when I tried to stand. I went back to my knees. The snow was up past my elbows. I stayed on my knees until the worst of the tilt passed, then tried again more slowly, and this time made it upright. I was standing in what appeared to be a ditch at the edge of a field. The snow was heavy and ongoing, not the gentle, decorative kind, but the serious kind, the kind that comes in at an angle driven by wind and hits your face with enough force to sting. I could see perhaps 30 feet in any direction before the storm made everything into gray-white noise. There were no buildings visible, no lights, no sounds except the wind and my own breathing, which was faster than it should have been and produced white clouds that the wind immediately destroyed. I did not know where I was. I did not know how I had gotten there, standing in the field, turning in a slow circle, looking for anything useful. I made a second discovery. I did not know who I was. Not in the philosophical sense, in the practical one. I searched for my name the way you search for a word that is on the tip of your tongue, certain the information existed, unable to locate it. I tried my address, my job, my phone number, the name of the last person I had spoken to. Nothing. A clean slate where there should have been decades of information. The only things I could access were general. I knew what snow was. I knew what cold was. I knew I needed to find shelter or warmth, and that the two things were not the same. I knew roughly how human bodies function under cold stress and approximately how long I had before mine became a serious problem. I did not know my name. I did not know what I looked like. I did not know who had brought me to this field. I started walking toward what I thought was the road. 20 feet into the walk, my left leg stopped cooperating correctly. Not fully, I could still move it, but with a lag, a half-second delay between intention and execution that made every step uneven and twice dropped me back into the snow. I got up both times. The road was visible eventually, a stripe of gray through the white, marginally less textured than the surrounding field. I made it to the pavement and looked in both directions and saw nothing but falling snow in both of them. Then I saw the lights. Not a car at first, just a brightness in the distance, diffused the way light looks through a storm. It took another 30 seconds before the shape resolved into headlights, and another 10 before I understood that the car was moving slowly enough that the driver might not see me in time. I raised my right arm. My left arm did not follow the same lag as the leg, possibly worse. I managed to get the right arm up and kept it up, and the car slowed and then stopped, and the lights changed, and there were red and blue among the white. A door opened, boots in the snow, a voice, "What are you doing out here?" I tried to answer. The words were not available. The cold had done something to my face or my throat, or the connection between the two and what came out was not language. I managed to stay upright until the officer reached me, and then I did not manage it anymore. And the next clear thing I remember is the back seat of the police car with a blanket that smelled of synthetic fiber and coffee. And another officer's voice saying something about a hospital and hypothermia and River Road and the warmth coming in increments through the blanket and through the car's heater and through the slow return of sensation to my hands and feet that hurt considerably more than the absence of sensation had. Then there was the hospital. But that is the next part. Part 2, Haywood Valley. The hospital was called Haywood Valley Medical Center, which told me I was somewhere called Haywood Valley, which told me I was almost certainly in the mountain region of Western Virginia, because I knew the geography of Virginia, even though I did not know my own name. The doctor who first saw me was named Dr. Patricia Chen, who was 41 and direct, and who explained in the specific economical language of a person who has explained difficult medical situations many times and has learned not to waste words on cushioning that doesn't help, that I had a significant closed head injury consistent with a blunt force impact. that I had moderate hypothermia, which was being treated that my left side weakness was likely temporary but would require monitoring, and that the memory loss was a recognized consequence of the head injury and might resolve partially or fully over time or might not. Might not, I wrote on the notepad the nurse had given me because my voice was not working and my left hand was not working well, and writing with my right hand required more concentration than speaking usually does. Writing was slow and required deliberate effort, but produced legible results. In some cases, patients with this type of injury recover most of their memories gradually over weeks or months, Dr. Chen said. In others, the episodic memory, personal memories, autobiographical information remains impaired, while procedural memory and general knowledge remain intact, which is consistent with what you're describing. You know what snow is, but not your name. That pattern makes neurological sense. I wrote, "Will I know who I am eventually?" "We hope so," she said. But we can't promise." The police officer who came to see me on the second day was named Detective Anna Strand, Haywood Valley Police Department, and she had the focused, unhurried quality of someone who had developed patience as a professional skill rather than a natural one. She sat beside my bed with a notepad of her own and asked questions and waited while I wrote the answers. No, I did not know my name. No, I did not know where I was from. No, I did not know who had brought me to the field or how I had gotten there. Yes, I had a vague impression of a car, dark, medium-sized, moving away from me when I first regained consciousness. The taillights had a specific shape, but I could not describe it with any precision. "Okay," Detective Strand said, making notes. "We're running your fingerprints and checking missing persons reports. If you have any identifying documents, they weren't with you when you were found. No wallet, no phone, no keys, just your clothes, which were not appropriate for extended outdoor exposure in those temperatures." She looked at me steadily. "Someone left you out there. That's not an accident." I wrote, I noted. "Are you afraid?" I thought about this. The honest answer required a moment. Then I wrote, "I think I would be if I knew what I was afraid of losing." Right now, I don't know what I had. Detective Strand looked at what I had written for a moment. Then she said, "That's one of the more honest things I've heard in an interview. I'll be back when we have something." Part 3, who I was. My name was Owen Marsh. Detective Strand brought me this information on a Thursday, 8 days after I was found in the field. A missing persons report had been filed in Richmond, Virginia by a colleague at a technology consulting firm where I had been employed. The fingerprints matched a driver's license on file. The photograph on the license showed a man I did not recognize, and looking at it felt like examining a photograph of a stranger about whom I had been given some biographical information. Owen Marsh, 36 years old, born in Charlotte, North Carolina, moved to Richmond 12 years ago for a job and stayed. Employed for 7 years at Archer Vance Consulting, a firm that provided data architecture services to mid-size financial institutions. No criminal record. One prior address change in Richmond 3 years ago from a 2-bedroom apartment to a townhouse. And engaged. The missing persons report had been filed by a colleague, but included in the file was a note from a woman named Vivian Cole, who had identified herself as Owen Marsh's fiance of 14 months and who had provided a separate statement to the Richmond police. I read the file. I looked at the photograph of the man named Owen Marsh. I did not recognize him. Detective Strand gave me space to sit with this. She was good at giving space, the specific quality of a person who understood that some information needed time to land before questions could be useful. "The Richmond police spoke with Ms. Cole," she said eventually. "Her statement says that on the evening you were found in the field, you and she had an argument about the engagement, that you left the townhouse angry, and that she did not see you after that." I wrote, "What kind of argument?" She didn't specify in the statement, said it was a personal matter. Yeah, I wrote, "Does she know I'm here?" "She does now. Richmond police notified her." A pause. "She hasn't contacted Haywood Valley Hospital yet." I sat with that for a moment. My fiance had been told I was found in a ditch after being left in a snowstorm and had not contacted the hospital where I was being treated. I wrote, "Does that seem normal to you?" Detective Strand's expression did not change. "It's a noted detail," she said. "Part 4, the town. Haywood Valley was a small city, 22,000 people in the valley proper, another 8,000 in the surrounding county that existed primarily as a service hub for the agricultural and light manufacturing communities of the Western Virginia mountain region. It had a downtown that took approximately 10 minutes to walk, and that contained, among other things, a pharmacy, a diner called Keller's, 2 coffee shops, a hardware store, a small regional hospital, and a branch of the county library that was open 6 days a week and had a children's section that took up roughly a quarter of the floor space. I know about the children's section because it was where I first saw Clara Whitfield. I had been discharged from the hospital after 3 weeks, at which point I was walking adequately, speaking adequately, and writing considerably more fluently than I had in the first days. I had no place to go. Detective Strand, who had become something of an advocate in addition to an investigator, had connected me with a social worker named Gerald Foss, who had arranged for a month in a furnished room above the hardware store on Main Street, operated by its owner as occasional rental income. The rent was covered through a county emergency fund while the investigation proceeded. I went to the library on the 4th day after discharge because it was warm and quiet, and the librarian did not ask me questions I couldn't answer. I took a table near the window with a stack of books I pulled more or less at random and spent 2 hours reading, which I could do without difficulty. The general knowledge was all there, including the reading, just not the personal history. The children's section was through a low wooden archway to my left. At 2 in the afternoon, a woman came through the main library door with a girl who appeared to be about 5 years old. The woman was perhaps 32, with dark red hair that she had pulled back practically, and the specific alert quality of attention that certain people have, the kind that takes in a room quickly and accurately without appearing to surveil it. The girl was wearing a purple coat and carrying a stuffed rabbit, and had already spotted the children's section archway and was heading for it with focused determination. Slowly, the woman said. The girl slowed to a fast walk. The woman, I learned later, her name was Clara, caught me watching this exchange and nodded briefly in the way that people nod at strangers in small towns in acknowledgement without obligation, and followed the girl toward the children's section. I went back to my book, but I noted the quality of her attention. It was the specific quality of a person who is managing something significant while not appearing to manage anything at all. Part 5, Vivian. Vivian Cole arrived in Haywood Valley on a Tuesday 4 weeks after I was found in the field. She had called the hospital 2 days before her arrival once she had apparently processed the information about my condition. The call was transferred to Detective Strand's office, and Detective Strand had relayed to me that my fiance was coming. I did not know how to feel about this. The woman coming to see me had been, according to the file, the last person to see me before the field. She had reported me missing. She had not contacted the hospital for nearly a month. She arrived at the furnished room above the hardware store on a Tuesday morning. She was 33, professionally dressed in a way that looked deliberate, with the specific composure of a person who has decided in advance how they are going to present themselves in a difficult situation. She looked at me for a moment in the doorway, and something moved across her face that I could not identify. It was not grief, not quite, and not relief, and not guilt exactly, but something adjacent to guilt that she collected quickly back behind the composure. Owen, she said. I go by Owen, I said, but I don't have any memory of being him. She came in, she sat in the chair by the window. I sat on the edge of the bed. We looked at each other across the small room. How much do you remember? She asked. Nothing personal, general knowledge intact, no memories of my life before the field. The doctors think it will come back. They don't know. She looked at her hands. She was wearing the engagement ring, a specific ring, pear-shaped diamond in a gold setting that I could see clearly and could not connect to any emotion or memory. It was simply a ring on a woman I did not know who had, according to the documents, agreed to marry the person whose body I was currently using. You should know, she said, that the argument we had that night was serious. You said things, I said things. She was choosing her words carefully in the way that people choose words when they have decided in advance what they will and will not say. I didn't handle it well. I wasn't at my best. What was the argument about? A pause, the relationship, where it was going. You had concerns about something you'd found out. What had I found out? Another pause, longer this time. I'd rather talk about moving forward, she said. I'd rather talk about what happens next for us. Yeah. I looked at her steadily. But I was not Owen Marsh in any meaningful sense that I could access, but I was the person currently sitting in Owen Marsh's life with Owen Marsh's body, reading Owen Marsh's file, and I had spent 4 weeks becoming reasonably good at observation without the overlay of personal history. What I observed was a woman who was managing this conversation very carefully, who was answering questions with deflections, and who had a specific tension in her jaw and shoulders that had been present since she arrived. Vivian, I said, what happened that night? She stood up. I need some time. She said, this is a lot to process. I'm going to stay in town for a few days. We can talk again. She left. I sat in the room above the hardware store and thought about the specific quality of her composure and about the things she had and had not said. Then I called Detective Strand. Part 6, Clara. Gerald Foss, the social worker, mentioned that there was a small community center on Elm Street that served as an informal gathering place for people who were new to the area or in transition, a weekly coffee morning, occasional dinners, a bulletin board for local services. He mentioned it as a resource. I went the following Thursday because the furnished room above the hardware store had the specific quality of a space that has been occupied by many temporary people and retains the feeling of their impermanence, and I needed to be somewhere that felt less temporary. Clara Whitfield was there with her daughter, whose name was June. I recognized her from the library. She recognized me from the same. You're the man from the table by the window, she said. Yes, I'm Owen, though the name is a work in progress. She looked at me for a moment with the direct evaluating attention I had noticed before. I heard about what happened, she said, not with the specific kind of curiosity that wants details, but with the specific kind that wants to know if it is appropriate to continue. This is a small town. I know, I said. I don't mind. I'm Clara. This is June. The girl in the purple coat, now in a yellow one, was already investigating the bulletin board with the focused attention she apparently brought to everything. She's thorough, I said. Comprehensively, Clara said. She reads every word of everything, including the backs of cereal boxes, which I've started to find both admirable and exhausting. I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed since the field, and it surprised both of us a little. Clara was a structural engineer. I learned over the following weeks she had moved to Haywood Valley 14 months ago with her daughter from a previous life in Charlottesville that she described only in broad strokes, the way people describe things they have put correctly behind them and are not going to relitigate. Her husband had died 2 years before the move from a cardiac event at 34. That had been the specific kind of unfair thing that does not allow for preparation. She was in Haywood Valley because a small regional engineering firm had offered her a job when she needed one, and because the size of the town and the pace of it had turned out to suit her in ways she had not expected. She was the most straightforward person I had encountered since waking up in the field. She said what she thought and asked what she wanted to know and was not performing anything. I found this after weeks of trying to reconstruct a self from documentary evidence while receiving carefully managed visits from my fiancé to be something close to essential. Part 7, what Detective Strand found. The investigation had been proceeding quietly. Detective Strand called me on a Wednesday morning in early March, 6 weeks after the field, and asked if I could come to the station. She had found several things. The first was a witness, a woman named Donna Hartley, who lived on Road 11 and had been driving home from her sister's house on the night I was found in the field. She had seen a dark blue Audi SUV pulled over on the shoulder of Route 11 near the access road to the field. She had not thought much of it at the time, someone having car trouble, she assumed. She had remembered it when the Haywood Valley Courier ran a brief item about the investigation a month later. Vivian Cole drove a dark blue Audi SUV. The second was a financial matter. The Richmond police, now actively cooperating with Detective Strand's investigation, had been looking at the records of Archer Vance Consulting, where I had worked. Vivian Cole worked at the same firm in the client relations division in the 12 months before my disappearance. A significant amount of proprietary client data had been moved from secure company servers to an external account. The technical trail pointed toward an account associated with my credentials. But not to you, Detective Strand said. The access pattern is wrong. Your actual login habits, time of day duration, navigation patterns don't match the access pattern for the transferred data. Whoever moved the data had your credentials, but not your behavior. I sat with this for a moment. She framed me, I said. We can't say that yet officially. What we can say is that the access that moved the data doesn't match your known pattern, and that a car matching her vehicle description was observed near the location where you were found. What would the data be worth? Architectural data for financial system security, protocols for 11 regional banks. To the right, buyer, a competitor, a bad actor, potentially significant. We're working with the Richmond office to trace whether the data has been offered or sold. She looked at me steadily. Owen, I need to ask you something directly. Go ahead. In the 2 weeks since Ms. Cole arrived in town, she has been very visible. She has had several conversations with townspeople, including the social worker who's been supporting you, including the doctor who treated you. She has presented herself as a concerned fiance. She has also asked at least 3 people whether you have recovered any specific memories. She paused. She's not asking how you are, she's asking what you remember. I thought about the conversation in the furnished room, about the careful word choices, about the argument she had declined to describe. She's checking whether I remember what I found out, I said. That's my read, Detective Strand said, which means you found out something she needed you to not remember, and she needed you to not be able to tell anyone. She left me in a field in January. Yes, Detective Strand said she did. Part 8, June. June Whitfield was 5 years old and had her mother's quality of focused attention applied to the full range of 5-year-old concerns, which were specific and earnest and occasionally surprising. She asked me on a Saturday in March whether I had found my memories yet. I said, not all of them. My dad forgot things sometimes, she said. He had to write them down. He had a lot of lists. That's a good system, I said. She considered this. Do you write lists? I write a lot of things down, I said. It helps. She nodded, satisfied. Then, Clara says you don't know who you were before, only who you are now. That's right, I said. I think who you are now is good, she said, with the specific conviction of a 5-year-old who has evaluated the situation and arrived at a conclusion. Then she went back to the drawing she had been working on, which appeared to be a very detailed rendering of the stuffed rabbit, with what I understood to be wings. I sat with what she had said for a long time after. Claire was at the counter making tea. She had heard the exchange and did not comment on it, which was one of the things I had come to appreciate about her. She did not explain her daughter to people or apologize for her, and she did not interpret what her daughter said in ways that made it smaller. She's right, Clara said eventually, setting 2 cups on the table. I've been watching you figure out who you are for 2 months. Whatever Owen Marsh was, what you are now is someone who shows up. For Gerald's Thursday morning, for the library, for conversations with a 5-year-old who wants to know if you found yourself yet. She looked at me across the table. She looked at me across the That's not nothing. That's actually quite a lot. I don't know what I was before, I said. No, she said, but I know what you are now. So does June. The tea was good. The kitchen was warm. Outside, the March snow was making way for the first suggestions of mud season, the ground starting to give up its frozen quality. The town of Haywood Valley was doing its ordinary Wednesday afternoon things through the window. It was the first time since waking up in the field that I had sat somewhere and felt that the somewhere was real. Part 9, The Confrontation. Vivian Cole had been in Haywood Valley for 3 weeks when Detective Strand moved on the investigation. The Richmond police had traced the data transfer. The architectural data had been offered for sale through an intermediary to a competing financial services technology firm 8 months before my disappearance. The sale had not completed. The buyer had become concerned about the provenance and withdrawn, but the offering had been documented. The intermediary, when interviewed, confirmed that the data had come from a contact named Vivian Cole. Detective Strand arrested Vivian at the hotel where she had been staying. I was not present for the arrest. I learned about it from Detective Strand, who called me at 8 in the morning on a Thursday and told me in the specific professional tone of a person delivering information that is both good news and not simple news. I sat in the furnished room for a long time after the call. What I felt was not satisfaction and was not grief and was not the specific quality of resolution that people describe after difficult things conclude. What I felt was the particular heaviness of understanding the complete picture. The woman who had agreed to marry Owen Marsh had taken his company credentials and used them to steal data, had framed him for the theft. And when he apparently found out the argument, the things she wouldn't tell me about had driven him to a field in Western Virginia in January and left him there. And she had, in a very literal sense, tried to end Owen Marsh. She had not succeeded, but she had ended him in every way that was perhaps more consequential. Taken his memory, taken his name, taken his understanding of who he was. What remained was a person who had been rebuilt slowly from the field up. I called Detective Strand back an hour later. The ring, I said, the engagement ring she was wearing, I want it evaluated. If it was purchased with money from the data sale, already flagged, Detective Strand said. Financial forensics is on it. And my employment at Archer Vance, the framing for the data theft, I'll need to cooperate with whatever clears that. Richmond has already started the process. Given the evidence and your cooperation, you're a witness, not a suspect. A pause. Owen, are you all right? I thought about the field in January, about the weeks in the hospital learning to write again, about the town above the hardware store, about the library, and Gerald's Thursday mornings in June asking if I had found my memories yet. I think so. I said, I'll know more in a few months. Part 10, what came back and what didn't. The memories returned gradually over the spring and into the summer. They came in the way that water finds its way through new ground, not all at once, not in response to any particular trigger I could identify or control. A specific song would play on the radio and something would shift in the back of my mind, not a memory exactly, but the shape of something that had been a memory. A smell, coffee sawdust. The particular quality of warm asphalt in summer would open a door that had been closed. By April, I remembered Charlotte where I had grown up, the specific sound of my mother's voice, the house I had lived in until I was 18, the oak tree in the backyard that had been struck by lightning when I was 9 and had taken 3 years to fully die. I remembered my father, who had been an electrician and who had taught me the patient, sequential logic of tracing a problem to its source. By May, I remember Richmond, the apartment, the job, the specific geography of the daily commute, the work at Archer Vance, which I understood now with the clarity of a person who can see both what they knew and what they were doing with what they knew. I had been good at the work. I had built systems for protecting data. The specific irony of the theft was not lost on me. By June, I remembered Vivian. The remembering of Vivian was not what I had expected. I had anticipated, I think most people would anticipate, that recovering memory of a person who had tried to kill you would produce primarily anger or fear, or the specific quality of retroactive understanding that retrospect provides. What I got instead was something more complicated, the full texture of a relationship that had been real for most of its duration and had then become something else. The early months when she had been precisely what she appeared to be: intelligent, ambitious, warm in specific ways. The gradual change as the pressure of what she was doing accumulated. The specific moment 11 days before the field when I had found something in the company's access logs that I had not been able to explain. I had not confronted her immediately. I had taken 2 weeks to build a complete picture, the same methodical approach my father had modeled for tracing electrical faults. By the night of the argument, I had enough to take to the company's security team. Vivian had known somehow that I was at the threshold of acting. What she had done next was drive me to a field in January. I called Detective Strand in June after the memories had returned sufficiently and told her what I remembered. She recorded the statement carefully and added it to the case file. The Richmond DA had been building a case for 3 months and was, according to Detective Strand, in a strong position. "Will you have to testify?" Clara asked that evening on her porch. "Probably," I said. "I'll do whatever they need." June was inside, already in bed. The summer evening was doing what Virginia summer evenings do, warm and green, the kind of air that has weight without being unpleasant. The porch light attracted moths. Somewhere down the street, a neighbor was mowing. "Are you okay with the memories coming back?" Clara asked. She asked the question the way she asked all her questions directly without overlay. I thought about it. Some of them are hard, I said. Vivian, especially. Not because of what she did, because of the period before it when I thought I knew who I was with her and was wrong. I paused. It's a specific kind of disorientation, remembering something you thought was real and understanding that the reality was different from the memory. Yes, she said simply. Not, I'm sorry, or that must be awful, or any of the constructions people use when they want to be supportive but don't know what to actually say. Just acknowledgement. I've been thinking about something. I said, tell me. I've been thinking about the person I was in Richmond, the Owen Marsh, in the file, the one with the job and the credentials and the engagement. I have his memories now, or most of them, but I don't feel like him. I looked at the street. I feel like the person who got rebuilt in Haywood Valley, who learned to walk again in a hospital room and found the library in Gerald's Thursday mornings. And I stopped. And she said, and you, I said, in June. Claire was quiet for a long time. The moths circled the porch light. The neighbor finished mowing. I've been thinking something too, she said finally. Tell me. I've been thinking that the person who came here in January without a name or a history is the person I actually know, and that the person in the file is someone I've heard about. She looked at me. I don't know which one you're gonna be when this is finished. I don't either, I said. I think I'll be both. Can you live with that? I think so. If the things I built here are still here. She held my gaze for a moment with the direct quality that I had noticed in the library 8 months ago and had been noticing ever since. They are, she said. They're not going anywhere. Part 11, the trial. Vivian Cole's trial began in October, 10 months after the field. I drove to Richmond for the testimony. Clara offered to come. I told her the offering was enough and that she should stay with June because June's weekday routine mattered and I did not want to disrupt it for an event that I needed to navigate on my own terms. Clara accepted this, which was one of the things about her. She did not insist on helping in ways that served her need to help more than my need to be helped. The courthouse was a building I did not remember, in a city I did remember, filled with people who knew the Owen Marsh from the file and were meeting in the witness box someone who was and was not that person. My former colleagues at Archer Vance, the Richmond detectives who had worked the financial investigation, the intermediary who had confirmed Vivian's role in offering the data and Vivian herself at the defense table. I had not seen her since Detective Strand's arrest in the hotel 8 months earlier. She looked the same. The composed presentation, the careful word choices, the specific quality of managing a situation. She looked at me when I took the stand, and I looked back at her with the specific quality of understanding I had developed over 10 months of having nothing to see her through except the complete facts. The attorney for the prosecution asked me to describe what I had found in the access logs that had told me the data transfer was anomalous. I described it. He asked me to describe the argument on the night I disappeared. I described what I remembered, which was now full and accurate, the confrontation, the things I had said, the specific moment when her composure had changed in a way that, in retrospect, I understood to mean that she had already decided what she was going to do. The defense attorney asked whether I had any memory of the actual event in the field. I said I did not, that my last memory of that night was the interior of the townhouse, and my first memory after it was the snow and the cold and the absence of my own name. Do you remember Ms. Cole driving you anywhere that night? The defense attorney asked. I do not. I said the memory is absent. So you have no direct memory of Ms. Cole being present in the field? No direct memory, I said. But I have a direct memory of what she did not do after I was found. She did not contact the hospital for 4 weeks. She came to Haywood Valley not to check on my condition, but to assess what I remembered. She asked multiple people whether I had recovered specific memories, not how my recovery was going. That is the behavior of a person who needs to know what a witness knows, not the behavior of a person concerned for someone they love. The defense attorney said he had no further questions. The jury deliberated for 2 days. The verdicts were guilty of corporate espionage and data theft, guilty of criminal negligence causing grievous bodily harm. The judge, considering the deliberate nature of leaving me in extreme cold with a head injury, added the finding that the conduct was reckless in the extreme. Vivian Cole was sentenced to 11 years. I drove back to Haywood Valley that evening. June was already asleep when I got there. Clara was on the porch with tea. How was it? She asked. Correct, I said. Not satisfying exactly, just correct. She handed me a cup. I sat down beside her. Are you done with it now? She asked. I thought about that. The field, the hospital, the furnished room, the library, Gerald's Thursday mornings, the slow return of the memories of the testimony. I think so, I said. I think I'm done with the Owen Marsh chapter. Now I'm just me. That works, she said. That's who I know anyway. Part 12, Who was built in Haywood Valley. I want to take a moment here to say something about the specific process of rebuilding a self from nothing, because I think the experience has something to offer that is not available from the outside. When you do not know who you were, you are also temporarily free of who you were. The expectations, other people's, your own, are absent. The accumulated habits of self-presentation, the reflexive identity performances that everyone maintains, the specific version of yourself that you have been building since adolescence, to navigate the social and professional world, all of it is gone. What remains is behavior, what you actually do when there is no history of behavior to guide you. What I did in the months between the field and the return of the memories was this. I was honest when I didn't know something, which was constantly, because I didn't know almost anything. I was consistent. I showed up to Gerald's Thursday mornings and the library and the conversations with the people I met. Not because I had always been reliable, but because showing up was the only available way to be a person in a context where nothing else was available to offer. I listened. This is perhaps the most significant one. Without the overlay of my own history and associations and preconceptions, I heard what people actually said rather than what I expected them to say. I heard Claire clearly from the first conversation because I had no pre-existing narrative about who she should be or what she should want. I paid attention to June in the specific way that children deserve fully without managing the interaction towards some purpose. She is one of the finest people I have ever met, insofar as I can evaluate that now, in the quality that makes her finest is the same quality that makes her 5 years old and exhaustive about cereal box ingredients. She is completely sincere. The Owen Marsh who came back in the memories in the spring and summer was, according to his own recollections, a person who had been good at the work and moderately good at the life around it, and not entirely good at the specific daily practice of paying attention to what mattered versus what was merely present. He had been building a structure, the job, the city, the engagement that functioned but had not been built with the patient attention of someone who understood what the structure was for. The person who was built in Haywood Valley understood what the structure was for. I did not lose the Owen Marsh memories. I did not lose the skills, the history, the complete texture of the life I had lived, but they arrived into a person who had already been shaped in the absence of them by what I actually chose to do when I had nothing else to guide me. The memories became additions of someone who already existed rather than the whole of someone. I am both. That is the honest answer to Claire's question on the porch. I am the person in the file, and I'm the person who's rebuilt in the field's aftermath. And what I am now is the combination of both the before and the after, with the understanding that the after is the part I actually chose. Part 13, what Claire said when I asked. It was February 14 months after the field. June was upstairs asleep. Snow was coming down outside, the second significant snow of the winter, the kind that would be a foot deep by morning and would require the specific collaborative effort that small towns bring to weather events. The clearing of sidewalks and the helping of neighbors and the production of large amounts of food for no particular reason. Claire and I had been since September in the specific and unannounced arrangement that develops between two people who have been spending a great deal of time together and have stopped pretending they are doing so for logistical reasons. We had not had a conversation about what we were. We had simply been what we were, and both of us, I think, had the same relationship to that quality of being, an appreciation for it, a recognition that the conversation was not yet necessary, a willingness to let it be what it was without requiring it to be named. but I wanted it named now, not for reasons of security or reassurance or the management of uncertainty, because naming things I had learned in the past 14 months was the beginning of being able to handle them correctly. I need to say something. I said she was at the counter making tea with the specific focused efficiency she brought to domestic tasks. She turned and looked at me. The direct assessment. Then say it, she said. I love you, I said, not in the way that people say things they are expected to say, in the way that I have arrived at through 14 months of paying attention to you while being incapable of performing an identity for your benefit. I have nothing to perform. What you've seen is what I am, and what I am is a person who loves you and June in this town and the life that has been built here. She looked at me for a moment. The kettle started to whistle. She did not turn to address it. I know, she said. I've known for a while. Why didn't you say anything? Because I wanted you to say it first. Because the last person who told me they loved me died, and I needed to know that the next person who said it was saying it because they meant it, and not because it was the next logical step. She looked at me steadily. You mean it? Yes, I said. The kettle continued to whistle. She turned to address it, poured the water, brought both cups to the table. I love you too, she said, setting the cups down, sitting across from me. For what it's worth, from a person who has been watching you build yourself from the ground up for over a year and finds the result considerably worthwhile. That's worth a great deal, I said. She smiled at the full unmanaged version that I had been watching develop over 14 months, and that was among many things I valued about Clara Whitfield, one of the most specific and accurate expressions of feeling I'd ever observed. Good, she said. Drink your tea. I drank my tea. Outside, the snow kept coming down. Part 14, 3 years later. This all happened 3 years ago. Claire and I were married the following April in a ceremony at the Haywood Valley Community Center attended by approximately 60 people, most of whom I had met in the 14 months between the field and the proposal, and a small number of whom my parents from Charlotte, two former colleagues from Richmond, had known Owen Marsh before the field. The wedding was a Thursday, because Thursday had been Gerald's morning, and I had always found Thursdays to be the best day of the week. June was the flower girl. She wore a yellow dress of her specific choosing and carried the stuffed rabbit, which had been permitted as an official participant in the wedding on the grounds that the rabbit had been present for most of the preceding year and had as much standing as anyone. I formally adopted June the following December. She was 6 by then and had over the course of the year transitioned from calling me by name to calling me dad with the specific easy confidence of a child who has made a decision and is not troubled by it. I was not troubled by it either. I was in fact unable to describe adequately how not troubled by it I was. My consulting work had expanded. After the trial, Archer Vance's CEO had contacted me directly to discuss the data security failure that Vivian's Access had exploited. I spent 3 months consulting on the remediation, which led to a formal engagement, which led to 3 additional clients in the financial services space. I set up a small office in the Haywood Valley Business District, a converted Victorian space with good light, and a conference room and a parking space that I valued considerably given the town's parking situation, and hired a part-time analyst named Priya who had been doing contract work for the regional government. The business was useful. The work was real. I understood from the inside exactly how financial data systems could fail because I had been the mechanism of a failure. And that understanding made me exceptionally good at identifying vulnerabilities and considerably better than average at explaining the significance of those vulnerabilities to clients who would otherwise treat data security as an abstraction. Claire's structural engineering practice had expanded too, a project with the county that led to 2 infrastructure assessments and a bridge rehabilitation that she was proud of in the specific way that engineers are proud of work that will outlast them. She had been promoted to senior associate at the firm and was, according to her colleagues, the most systematically thorough person they had worked with, which surprised me not at all. June was 8. She had transitioned from comprehensive readings of cereal boxes to comprehensive readings of chapter books, which she discussed with me at dinner in the focused detail of a person who had found an efficient method of processing and was applying it fully. She had also taken up drawing with the same comprehensive dedication, and the house contained a large number of detailed pencil sketches of various subjects, including the stuffed rabbit, now named Edmund, a name she had settled on with authority, the engineering blueprints Clara occasionally brought home, and what she described as the town from above, which was an imaginative aerial map of Haywood Valley that was for a child of 8. Remarkably spatially accurate. Vivian Cole was in year 3 of an 11-year sentence. Her appeal had been denied. I had not followed her case closely after the verdict. What was hers to process was hers to process. My parents drove up from Charlotte for Thanksgiving and stayed for 5 days. My father and I spent one afternoon replacing a section of the back fence that had been leaning for a month, and he told me while we worked that he was proud of what I had built in Haywood Valley, which he said with the specific brevity of a person who has spent 62 years believing that what you do says what you mean more accurately than what you say. I told him I learned it from him. He said he doubted that. I said I didn't. Detective Strand had retired. She came to the wedding. She had been on the guest list before I asked her. Clara had put her there, and she danced at the reception with Gerald Foss, which neither of them had apparently planned, and both of them had apparently enjoyed. I had heard from mutual acquaintance that they were now. In the specific reluctant language of people who are not ready to name things but are clearly something seeing each other, I consider this the best possible outcome for both of them. The field on Route 11 was visible from the county road. I drove past it occasionally on the way to client meetings. In January, when the snow was right, it looked exactly as I imagined it must have looked on the night I was left there. A flat white expanse under a gray sky, the fence line on the far side, the road running past it, indifferent. I did not find the field distressing to look at. I found it informative. That field was where Owen Marsh ended and where the person I currently am began. Both things are true. The ending was not chosen, was not fair, was not the product of any decision I had made. The beginning happened in the aftermath of the ending through the slow accumulation of days in a small town in Western Virginia. Through a library and a community center and a woman who said what she meant, and a 5-year-old who wanted to know if I had found my memories yet. The field is where the road forgot my name. Haywood Valley is where I found another one. Both names are mine. That is a thing I want to say to anyone who has had something taken from them that they thought was who they were, the name, the history, the relationship, the specific accumulated identity of a life that turned out to be something other than what they believed. What you are when everything has been removed is the beginning of who you become, not the end. Start there. Build from there. The road ahead does not require you to know who you were to know where you are going. Drive until it gets honest. You will recognize the place. The end. Cast of characters: Owen Marsh, data security consultant, 36, then 40, woke up in a field in January without his name, rebuilt himself from the field up, found that who he became was better than who he had been because he chose it. Clara Whitfield, structural engineer, Haywood Valley, 32, widowed, precise, direct, warm, in the specific way of someone who has processed significant loss and arrived at a clear understanding of what matters, puts things in the right places and leaves them there. June Whitfield, Clara's daughter, 5, then 8, reads everything comprehensive, named the stuffed rabbit Edmund, called Owen Dad after deciding to, without ceremony or negotiation, which is the correct way to make that particular decision. Vivian Cole, data security specialist, Archer Vance Consulting, 33, stole financial data using Owen's credentials, drove him to a field in January, arrived in Haywood Valley to assess what he remembered, currently in year 3 of an 11-year sentence. Detective Anna Strand, Haywood Valley Police Department, patient, professional. Put Gerald Foss on Clara's wedding guest list without asking, danced with him at the reception, is described by mutual acquaintance as seeing him. Gerald Foss, social worker, found Owen a furnished room above the hardware store, ran Thursday morning, coffee at the community center for 11 years, danced with Anna Strand at a wedding, and apparently found this development acceptable. Dr. Patricia Chen, Haywood Valley Medical Center. Direct Precise does not cushion information in ways that don't help. 41 years old and good at her job. Edmund, the stuffed rabbit, present for most of the significant events of the past 3 years, has standing. Part 15, the things that came back wrong. I want to tell you about the specific quality of memory recovery because I think people who have not experienced it imagine it as a clean process, information returning, like files being recovered from a backup intact and organized and correctly labeled. That is not what it is. What it is more like walking through a house you lived in once and finding that some rooms have been changed and some have not, and that you cannot always tell from looking at a room whether the change occurred before or after you left. Memory is not recorded the way video is recorded, it is reconstructed each time it is accessed from the same underlying material. And the reconstruction can shift depending on what was accessed most recently, what emotional context the memory was stored in, and what the purpose of the remembering is. I remembered Vivian clearly eventually. The relationship, the arguments, the specific texture of the life we had built together in Richmond. What I found in the remembering was that some of what I remembered was accurate, and some of what I remembered was a reconstruction that had been shaped by what I had wanted to believe rather than what was actually there. I had wanted to believe the relationship was good. I had evidence to the contrary that I had filed under different labels. She was stressed, she was ambitious. The friction was normal for two people building careers simultaneously. I had been generous in my interpretations and parsimonious with my concerns, which is something I have come to understand as a failure mode for people who are capable of making a case for something and choose to make the case for the thing they want to be true. The data theft had begun 18 months before the field. The access logs showed it clearly, which meant that for 18 months I'd been living with a person who was systematically dismantling my professional standing while presenting herself as my partner for 18 months. The friction I had attributed to ambition and stress had been the friction of a person managing a sustained deception. I had not seen it because I had not been looking for it, because looking for it would have required me to hold the possibility that the person I had chosen to commit to was not the person she appeared to be. I think about this in the context of what I learned in the months before the memories came back, the months of having nothing to interpret through except what was actually in front of me. Clara, with no history to project onto her, was entirely herself from the first conversation. I heard her accurately because I had no preferred version of her to substitute for the accurate one. June was entirely herself because I had no preconceptions about who a 5-year-old with a stuffed rabbit should be. The lesson of the field is not to stop trusting people. It is to trust your observations over your interpretations. The observations, what people actually do, how they actually behave, what their actions actually add up to, are more reliable than the interpretations, which are vulnerable to what you want to believe. Vivian's actions over 18 months added up to a clear picture. I had been choosing the interpretation over the observation. The field was the cost of that choice. I do not say this to assign myself blame for what she did. She made her choices and she is accountable for them. And the 11 years are the correct accounting. But the capacity to notice what was actually there rather than what I wanted to be there was something I had to learn in the aftermath of losing everything. And it is something I have not stopped practicing. Clara notices things. That is one of the qualities I valued from the beginning. The direct, undistorted attention she brings to what is actually in front of her. She does not tell me what she thinks I want to hear. She tells me what she observes. When I first began to understand that I had feelings for her that were more than the natural warmth of dependency on someone kind, I asked myself what I actually observed rather than what I wanted to observe, and what I observed was a person who was exactly what she appeared to be. That is not as common as it should be. I know that now in a way I did not know it before the field. Part 16, June's question. In the summer after Claire and I married June, and I had a conversation at the kitchen table that I think about often. She was working on the aerial map of Haywood Valley. It had grown considerably from the first version. She had added the library, the hardware store, Gerald's community center, the road to the field that she had learned about from a combination of overhearing and direct inquiry, because direct inquiry was her approach to information she wanted. Dad, she said, not looking up from the map. Yes. Do you still have the other memories, the ones from before? Yes, I said, most of them. Are they different from the ones you made here? I thought about how to explain memory recovery to a 7-year-old in a way that was accurate without being overwhelming. A little bit, I said, the ones from before feel like something that happened to someone else, like reading about a character in a book. The ones from here feel like mine. She considered this. Added a small mark to the map. I identified it later as the community center. Is that sad? She asked. No, I said. It's just how it is. The ones from before are still important because they're part of how I got here. But the ones from here are the ones I'm going to keep making. She nodded, satisfied. Then Edmund has memories too. Does he? He remembers all the important things. Oh, what are the important things? She looked at the rabbit who was propped against the sugar bowl with the specific dignified bearing that rabbits in stuffed form maintain. Who loves him? She said. That's the most important thing to remember. I looked at my daughter, because the adoption was complete by then, and the word was correct in every way, and thought about the field in January and the hospital and the furnished room and the library with the woman who had dark red hair and paid complete attention. The field was where the road forgot my name. But June knew who loved her. That was the most important thing to remember. Edmund is very wise, I said. June agreed that this was correct and went back to the map. Part 17, a note on what Vivian lost. I want to say something about Vivian Cole that is not about what she did to me. What she did to me is documented the theft, the framing, the field, the 11-year sentence. That is the legal record, and it is accurate. What she lost is separate from that and harder to quantify. She lost a relationship that was for most of its first year genuine. I remember this clearly now, the early period when she had been exactly what she appeared to be, intelligent and ambitious and capable of the specific focused warmth that she directed at the people she valued. I was one of those people once. The relationship had been real once. She lost it by making a decision, probably a small decision at first, an incremental choice that had seemed manageable to use my professional standing for her own purposes. That first decision made the second easier. Each subsequent one required a slightly larger departure from the person she had been before the first one. By the time she drove me to the field, she had traveled so far from the person who had first loved me that the person who had first loved me was essentially gone. I do not say this as sympathy, I say it as observation. The cost of the choices she made was not only the 11 years, it was the erosion of herself incrementally each time she chose the deception over the alternative. Each small choice built on the last until she was capable of leaving someone she had once loved in a ditch in January. People talk about betrayal as something that happens to the person betrayed. What I understand now with the specific clarity of someone who has been betrayed and then had time to think clearly about the full picture is that betrayal also happens to the person who commits it. You cannot do that to someone and remain unchanged. The person capable of doing that has built themselves into someone different decision by decision from the person they were before. I do not know who Vivian Cole is now after 3 years. I hope she is using the time to understand what happened to her, not only what she did. Because what happened to her, the slow erosion of herself through escalating deception, is worth understanding if you want to become something different on the other side of it. That is the only useful thing I can offer about Vivian Cole. The rest belongs to her. Part 18, the fence. In the spring of year 2, I built a fence. The property, Claire and I had bought a house on the eastern edge of Haywood Valley with a yard that backed up to a creek and a half acre that had previously been a vegetable garden and had reverted over 4 years of disuse to a combination of tall grass and the specific aggressive optimism of blackberry brambles needed defining. The property line on the south side had no fence. And the neighbor's dog had an expansive understanding of its own territory that extended well into ours. I bought the materials, I dug the post holes, I set the posts in concrete level, and plumbed the way my father had shown me with the back fence at the Charlotte house when I was 12. I ran the rails, I attached the pickets. The whole project took 3 weekends, spread over 6 weeks in March and April, because the weather was not always cooperative and because I was not rushing. Clara came out on the second Saturday of the project with coffee and stood at the edge of the work, looking at what I had done. Straight, she said. I measured twice, I said. You always measure twice. My father taught me that the second measurement is the one you can build on. She handed me the coffee. We stood at the fence line for a moment looking at the work in progress, the posts in the first rail, run the corner, bracing done. You know, she said you could have hired someone. I know, I said. But you wanted to do it yourself. Yes. She looked at the fence, then at me with the direct quality that I had learned to read accurately over the past 2 years. The field, she said, the hospital, the room above the hardware store, the testimony. She paused. All of it, you did it yourself. I had help, I said. You had people who were present, she said. That's different from people doing it for you. She took her coffee back. The fence looks good. It'll last 20 years, I said. Good, she said. We'll still be here in 20 years. She went back inside. June appeared in the back door, almost immediately, the stuffed rabbit under one arm, asking whether she could help with the next section. I told her yes, and found her a task that was real and age appropriate and required the specific, comprehensive attention she brought to everything. And she applied herself to it with complete seriousness while I worked beside her. My father's voice and memory, the second measurement, is the one you can build on. I had lost everything. I had rebuilt it measurement by measurement from the field up. The fence was straight, the posts were level, the concrete was cured. My house, my family, my fence. I measured twice. I was still here. That is the whole story, or it is the shape the story has so far. The rest is still being built. The daily work of it, the measurements and the adjustments and the specific patient attention that good construction requires. I wake up knowing who I am. That is not something I take for granted. Not now, not ever, not after the field. Part 19, what Detective Strand said at the wedding. Detective Strand gave a toast at the wedding. I had not known she had not told me, and Clara had not told me, because both of them understood that if I had known in advance, I would have asked her not to. And both of them apparently judged that I needed to hear it, regardless of whether I wanted to. She stood at the front of the community center with a glass of sparkling water. She did not drink, which was information I had acquired only that evening, and she said the following: I have reconstructed it from memory as accurately as I can. I met Owen Marsh on the second day after he was found in a field on Route 11 in January. He was in a hospital bed. He couldn't speak. He didn't know his name. When I asked him what he remembered, he wrote on a notepad, "Nothing before the snow." In most investigations, that would be a starting point, a lack of information to be filled in over time. What was unusual about Owen was what he did with the absence. Most people confronted with the loss of their identity try to recover the identity. They reach backward, they reconstruct, they locate themselves in what they were. Owen located himself in what he was becoming. He showed up to Gerald's Thursday mornings. He found the library. He paid attention to the people in this town with a quality of attention that most people with their full history intact can't manage, because most people with their history intact are too busy being who they were to notice who they're encountering. I have been a police detective for 23 years. I have seen a great deal of difficult things and a reasonable number of good ones. What happened in this town over the past 2 years to this specific person, because he was in this specific town that is one of the good ones? Clara, you knew from the beginning what you were looking at. You had the good sense to wait and the better sense to not wait too long. June Edmond and everyone else in this room, thank you for being part of what was built here. Owen, who you are now, is the man who deserved to survive the field. Congratulations. She sat down. Gerald Foss, sitting beside her, said something in a low voice that made her laugh, which was the first time I had seen Anna Strand laugh, and which I have since learned is not uncommon when she is with Gerald. I thanked her after dinner. She said, I was just describing what I observed. That's my job. You're good at it, I said. So are you, she said, now. Outside the community center windows, the April evening was doing its thing, longer than February, warmer than March, the specific quality of Virginia spring that does not apologize for arriving. I had been in that building for the first time at Gerald's Thursday morning 14 months earlier, when I did not know my name and was learning to be a person from the ground up. Now I was married in it. The road had found a new name for me. I intended to keep it. Part 20, the map. June finished the aerial map of Haywood Valley on a Saturday in November, 3 years after the field. She had been working on it intermittently for 18 months, adding to it, correcting it, revising sections that she determined were not spatially accurate enough. The final version was approximately 2 feet by 3 feet, rendered in color pencil on heavy paper, and it was, for a 9-year-old, working from memory and observation and occasional Google Maps consultation that she conducted with the focused purpose of primary research, remarkably complete. The map included the library, the hardware store with the furnished rooms above it marked with a small star that she told me meant important starting point, Gerald's community center, the hospital, the diner where she had first eaten grilled cheese with me at Clara's suggestion 6 weeks after I arrived in Haywood Valley, the bridge over the creek that Clara had assessed for the county and that June considered structurally sound on the grounds that her mother had said so, our house. And at the edge of the map where the county road ran north along the valley floor and then bent east toward the mountain, a small rectangle of white space labeled in June's careful printing, the field. I looked at it for a long time. Why did you include that? I asked. She looked at me with the direct quality she had inherited from her mother. Because it's where you started, she said. The map would be wrong without it. I looked at the map, at the library where I had first seen Clara, at Gerald's community center, at the hardware store where I had lived for a month above the smell of sawdust and machine oil, at our house on the eastern edge of town, with the creek behind it and the fence I had built in April. At the white rectangle at the edge of the map where the road met the field. Thank you, I said. June nodded. I'm going to frame it, she said, for the hallway. She did. It hangs in the hallway of our house between the kitchen and the stairs. The aerial map of Haywood Valley in June's colored pencil, complete with the library and the community center and the field at the edge where the road forgets your name. Every day I walk past it. Every day the map tells me where I started and where I am. Both things are on the map. Both things are true. The field and the house are on the same piece of paper connected by the same road. That is the complete story. That is, I think, the only kind of story worth telling, the kind where the ending requires the beginning and the beginning is honest about what it was and the road between them is long enough to have changed what it carried. The map is in the hallway. The house is warm. June is downstairs making something with Edmund. Claire is upstairs doing something with blueprints. I am writing this down. I know who I am. I wake up knowing one more thing and then I am done. The stuffed rabbit Edmund. June gave Edmund to me on the morning of the adoption, before the courthouse, before the paperwork, before any of the official steps that made her my daughter in the language of the law. She put him in my hands in the kitchen at breakfast and said, he should be with you for today. He remembers all the important things. I carried Edmund through the courthouse. I held him during the signing. I gave him back to June after in the hallway outside the courtroom, and she took him back with the satisfied nod of a person whose plan has worked correctly. What I understood from that exchange, from the trust of it, from the simple, confident generosity of a child handing you the most important thing they own, because today you need it more than they do, is that I had arrived somewhere I had not known I was trying to reach. Not the adoption, not the house, not the marriage, or the fence, or the consulting business, or the recovery of the memories. The place where a 9-year-old trusts you with Edmund. That is the destination. That is what the road was for. That is what survived the field. Everything worth keeping survived it. I wake up knowing every day. The field is on the map. The house is on the map. The road between them is the story. Every step of it was worth walking. Every measurement was worth taking twice. Drive until the road gets honest. You will know the place when you find it. It will know you too. That is all. That is everything. That is enough. Edmund agrees. Haywood Valley, Virginia, 3 years and counting. The map is in the hallway. The fence is straight. The road found its way home.